that I was going to make another sample mosaic at the school, and I thought I'd do some log cabin, right? So for prepping these pieces, I did like I showed you before. I'll show you again in case some of you are just now joining me. I use the Morton system. I like to get some nice strips, nice straight strips. I've got a spot over here where it's not quite straight. I've got a spot over here that looks like it's straight. When I put this down on the board, you can see we'll be following the grid. So that side's straight. This side is not straight. It's a little curvy, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to give myself a straight edge. This bit right here I can save for some more of my fun shapes, right? Let me get, oh no, I didn't press hard enough. All right. Back to the pistol grip with you. Okay, let's do this again. So like I said earlier, you might not have been here. I usually stand up to cut because it's easier to press down and get your weight into the glass. You don't have to worry about your score lines not breaking quite right. So I took and I just cut a bunch of 1/4-inch strips. Your cutter, the edge isn't the 0 mark. The edge is what goes against the bar. The scoring wheel is what is the 0 mark, right, on a ruler. So right, for the, if you're measuring. Anyway, this is the cutter gauge, and if you're using a Toyo cutter with your Morton system, it is going to measure your 0 line. So you put that down on your bar. I don't know if it doesn't make sense, just wait. I hope it will. All right, so your 0's there. I'm going to push this down. Now I can see exactly where my 0 mark is. When I'm cutting something and I need it to be ultimately like super straight, all the same size, I can use my the glass stops. So the glass stops, you can come over here, you put them down in the bar, you unscrew them just like a 1/4 of a turn, adjust your length, and there's my 1 inch, and then push it together and then tighten that down. So if I wanted a bunch of 1-inch strips, that's what I could do. For this one, I wanted a bunch of 1/4-inch strips, and it's okay if they're not quite right. They can be a little bit off. So I take a pencil in this case, and I mark my 1/4 of an inch, and I make a little mark with my pencil on my bar, and now I know that's the line that I want to follow for my bar. It erases, and you can continually put more pieces in there or more lines in there. You know, you can figure out exactly where it is, but 1/4 inch is pretty typical for me, so I use that fairly often. So I'm going to go ahead and move that back up to the top, and now I can make my 1/4-inch strips. So line number 1, 1/4-inch strip. I don't think I pushed hard enough again. Anyway, line number 2, 1/4-inch strip, and this time since it's so small, I'm holding it from up top, and I can see where I was before. So I'm going to start down and go up this time. Again, my fingers at the top of the bar, and I can just push right into it. Okay, so I could cut a whole bunch like that. And anytime you're recommending, or anytime you're cutting 1/4-inch strips, I recommend cutting groups of them off. So cut a group of 4 off, break those. Break it in half. This is the one I'm not sure about. Oh, it did it. Yay, I got it. And then cut in half and in half. So this can help to avoid that stress where the glass breaks almost all the way and then goes whoop off the side. Just a little tip for you there. All right, so that's how I cut all of these guys here. And for mosaics, when you're working with a log cabin, you can kind of get away with cutting all of your shapes beforehand and then putting them in there. Fusing, sometimes that can get a little bit harder. The pieces don't quite go together as much. So anyway, I just cut a bunch of strips out in advance because I wasn't sure where I was going to put these anyway. So my pattern, when I'm going around here, I'm just going to move the bar out of the way so you can see my cutting surface. I am just going to put this in place and use my Sharpie so that I know where to cut anything. You can, these first initial cuts, just cut directly on the glass. Like I know that's going to fit, so I can cut it there. Again, I can just break it with my hands because it's nice and skinny. Remember, when you're making a score, you're pushing up underneath the score line and down on either side. So you can carefully do that with your hands if you're comfortable with that. And then I just came off the edge to do the rest of these cuts. It may be helpful to to make your marks with the Sharpies first. And you can kind of get out whether or not you want to do it, right? So there's that first one. Then before I went and did the next set, I need to finish that side. So I was doing lights in the middle, I think, and darks on the outside. This isn't very dark, but I was also kind of alternating. That's fun. Yeah, maybe. Oh, maybe I'll do darks on the inside this time and the lights on the outside. Why not? And that yellow looks really good with that. So I think that's what I'll do there. Anyway, as you're working with this adhesive film, you can see again, it's not sticky until everything's been heat set. And this actually allows you to grout immediately when you've finished. So I'm gonna go over here, this following my pattern. Yeah, the long one, right? Yeah, long one. Okay, this is the long side. And I'm gonna make my mark on this side because I don't wanna clean my glass before I glue it. So I'm going to keep the marks on the textured side up. I'm going to make my mark right there and use my mosaic nippers to cut straight across. Okay, that guy fits there, and then I can go and make my next mark. And this is one of those things, you know, mosaics take time. So it's not something that you can really rush through. I mean, you could rush through it, I guess, but the amount of effort that you put into it is going to be apparent in your result. Okay, and then I can continue to think about my design and what I really want everything, how I want it to read. So the cutting of the strips first this way allows you to be a little bit more free form in what pieces go where. In advance, you know, this is kind of more like a true quilt. Like the more pieces you can get together, the more like different colors that you can get together in there, the more it's going to read like a quilt. And you don't need all of your pieces to match even. Like the yellows could be off if you wanted to. So now I'm going to bring this on the side and come over here, and I can see that goes there, that goes right there. And notice sometimes I use my mosaic nippers, sometimes I use my cutter. The cutter is going to give me a nice straight line. The mosaic nippers are a little bit off, but usually they're not that far off that it really makes much of a difference. And I actually might have even guesstimated that wrong there. Let's see if I push that over a little bit. Yeah, that's just a little bit too big. So guess what? Mosaic nippers it is. So then I don't know if I cut on the inside or the outside. Anywho, so glad you guys are hanging out with me. So if you get to a point where you're designing and you need to take a break, but you don't want any of your pieces to move. Nope, not gonna do red. You don't want your pieces to move. Ooh, purple, brown, that's good. You can always heat set part of it, walk away, and then come back. Or, you know, maybe it's brownish and red. Maybe it is like the Peacock Feather, a really intricate mosaic. See, those pieces are both kind of brown, not the same glass, but doesn't matter. Like with the Peacock Feather, there was a lot going on there. Like this, I completed in, I don't know, 3 days, I think, basically. But, you know, I was also and doing this and that. I took it home with me to the motel, had my hot plate, built little sections. If I had some pieces that I were kind of close to where they needed to be, I put them on the heat plate, set everything in place, and then I could go back and move them later when I needed to continue working. All right. All right, so laying that down. All right, remember, mark, cut to the inside of my mark this time. So black Sharpie on dark glass can be hard to see. You can use silver Sharpie, or if you're using the Sharpie, just kind of tilt the glass a little bit and you can see it in the light. So it's just a reflection of the Sharpie mark. Turn that over there, get that, and that is going to be, I want to cut to the inside of that mark. And it's right there. So what is everybody working on while they are quarantined at home or under shelter-in-place orders? Are you hanging out with your family? Are you Skyping with your family? Are you taking online classes? I've been catching up on all those things that I never have time to do. So it's actually been feeling really good. It's kind of a bummer that so many shows have been canceled, but it's definitely the responsible thing to do. Glasscraft and Bead Expo. I'm just looking forward to that, but now I have time, you know, to get my demos like fully functioning for that. So I'm just going to do a demo on the stage in Las Vegas, and Glasscraft and Bead Expo. And I'm still going to do that. I've got a couple of different stepping stones that I'm going to do. So I've got a friend out there who lives in Las Vegas. I'm probably going to have her pick up the stepping stones because I don't want to mail those stepping stones. And then I'll just leave them with her so she has a nice stepping stone for her desert yard. Okay. Down to the last couple pieces here. I think I did red in the middle of these. It was a nice little popo color. Put that in there. And then I'm going to show you how easy it is to heat set all of these guys. Nice thing about this project will be ready to grout as soon as everything cools down. So after I heat set it and let everything cool down, it takes maybe 5 minutes before it's ready to grout. The stepping stone can take a little bit longer. When I heat that, I tend to do it in the oven. I do either in the oven or I use the mosaic mesh. And if I'm heating it in the oven, the stepping stone takes quite a lot of heat. All right, that last piece I think I'm going to wait to cut just so I can see where everything is. Make sure it's properly spaced because I'm not sure if I've got my, if I do have everything spaced properly. All right, so I'm going to move this over here. My heating station's right over here. So I'm going to put that down, and once more, anyway, this has not started melting yet. I can still see those bubbles. They're hanging out there. So I'm just going to wait for the adhesive to start to warm up a little bit, and then those pieces I can move them in place. I don't even bother moving these pieces. They're out of place before the adhesive has started to melt because it's much easier when the adhesive has liquefied. It becomes a lubricant, and I can just slide everything into place. All right. I don't know if you can see that. Once I figure out the zoom, I'll show you guys. However, I can see these pieces are starting to move now. This is awesome. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So I can move these pieces right where they need to be. I kind of move them around a little bit too to kind of squish out any of the adhesive that's in between them. Same idea with the groutless, except this one, it's not going to rise to the surface. You're just kind of so that the glass is well adhered, fully adhered. And then I'm just spacing out any, right? Those gaps that I left, they're there for the grout. And I can go in here and move any of the other pieces that didn't quite set. I was working on this in Western Nebraska, and before I left, I had these pieces all cut. So I set them in place so that I wouldn't have to figure out where everything went again. It's really nice. The No Days adhesive is really nice for free form designs. Like, I seldom start with a plan. Occasionally I do, and man, those projects take forever. I like starting without a plan most of the time, or like kind of half of a plan, because then I can really kind of improvise, and I find that it's a little bit more freeing. And working with the No Days is super freeing, especially because if I go in here and I decide later that one of those colors doesn't work, I can easily just pop it out and switch it around for a different color. If I decide my pattern, if my pattern is a little bit off, I can switch that out too, or I can go in there and heat it up again. So got that little teeny tiny piece that I want to fit in there. And so I'm noticing that some of my pieces maybe were a little bit wider than my 1/4 inch strip. Again, this isn't something that I mean, this is kind of a sample piece for me. I've got a couple of large windows that I'm planning on doing a log cabin with. Oh, what a pretty design. And those pieces, I'll probably get a little bit more, you know, maybe I'll get a little bit more antsy or a little bit more persnickety, I suppose, on whether my pieces are 1/4 inch or not. But quite honestly, I think it adds a little bit more interest if your pieces aren't cut super perfectly. Like if everything, it's a little less organic, the design at least. So I don't know, you can say I'm using it as an excuse for imperfect work, or you can just say that, you know, I'm working untethered. All right. So there we go. This cake plate, by the way, is really handy. If you don't have a griddle at home, a heat gun works well. A hairdryer will not work. But look at that design. Very cool. When it cools down, I'll be able to hold this up for you a little bit better. And when you take this off of the hot plate, you do have a couple, depending on how thick the base piece of glass is and the surface that you put it on, you have a couple minutes to move the pieces exactly where they are supposed to be if something shifted while you were moving it. But once things start settling in, you don't want to move it anymore, because then you're going to start to weaken the bond. And it's still a little bit warm, but not too bad. Anyway, there's what I've got going so far. It's looking pretty good. Oh, that piece looks like it needs to move a little bit. Actually, this piece needs to move a little bit. We'll do that when we get there. Continuing on with the cutting of the glass. All right, so I want to finish this pattern over here. Start with this guy here. And notice I can start working on this right away. These pieces have cooled already. Like if I needed, theoretically, if I needed to grout, I could start now, but I'd probably give it just a little bit longer, because when you grout, it's a chemical reaction. So I don't want to speed up that chemical reaction with a little bit of heat. So I'd probably give it just a little bit longer. All right, piece number 1. Oh, this is exciting. I'm going to finish this today, and fairly shortly too, I think. So I think, I'm not sure. After this, eat a little bit of something, gather everything together for my next project. I'm in my basement studio, so I have all the materials for any of the projects that I need to do. If they're not like half done already, I'm sure none of you know that feeling at all. So it's kind of nice to be able to finish this project that I started. I mean, obviously I had a plan. I was going to share it with you all. That must be why I started it. Okay, that piece is going to go right there, and need to remember I'm cutting inside the line. So the Sharpie line, what cut on, right? I could cut in several places. I could cut on the line, but the line is like a 1/16 of an inch. So there it is. So I can cut on the inside or the outside, right? Or the middle. Well, the best way to actually know where I need to cut is be consistent. And I want to make my mark on the outside so that I know that I want to cut to the inside of the glass. Pretty close. I cut a little bit too close, so this might be short, but I can just space out my gaps, right? Just space out the gaps and nobody will know. I cut one a little diagonal, so I'm just straighten it up real quick. There we go. And then I hope everybody's feeling all right. Virus is making its way around. We just got news that we had the first case pop up in Lincoln, a confirmed case. I know we had some basketball tournaments that got canceled because there were some folks in attendance that apparently had been exposed to it. I hope you're not stressing too much about the situation. I know it's hard not to. A lot going on, a lot of uncertainty right now, but at least we can hang out together. If we can be together, it makes it a little less stressful. They're so good for your health, for your mental health and well-being. Gives you something to focus on, gives you a way to process some of these ideas that maybe you're dealing with. Several glass blowers on my Instagram feed, pendants, various things. I do have a mosaic mandala set that I work on, and I was half thinking like what kind of design I could, how I could alter my pattern to make it read a little bit differently. I did want to do, I've got an idea for my American Mosaic Society, the Society of American Mosaic Artists Conference, SAMA. That's another one that's been canceled. That was coming up in May in Tucson. So my salon piece, I now have much longer to think about it at least. So that's kind of nice, unless they do something online, in which case I need to start working faster again. But however, I've got a little bit of time to think about that, and I wanted to do kind of some sort of reptile designed mandala. I've got some really great glass for it. You can kind of see here. I was thinking that would be a good reptile design glass. And then I've got these great eyes. My partner works in glass as well, and he makes some really cool eye canes out of borosilicate glass. Oh, shoot. I think I just got off on my pattern. It's supposed to be this way. There we go. Phew. And I was going to use those in my mosaic mandala. I need to get on the torch so I can figure out how to lens them a little bit better so that they are magnified, because I could use them as is, but they're really tiny. But if I could lens them, then they'll grow. It's going to kind of multiply the design, which is why when I'm working in fused glass, I like to have a clear cap versus building on top of the clear. The clear cap helps magnify everything and also adds a little bit more depth. Kind of nice that way as well. Anyway, just a little bit about what I'm up to right now. I was also going to put my glass dress in the Glasscraft and Bead Expo Gallery of Excellence. So she's ready. She's on display upstairs, but she's going to sit there for a little bit longer until it happens. That was the glass dress that I made out of mosaics for the Glass Art Society conference in Murano a couple of years ago. And another one of the projects that I'm working on involves building her out further, because I'm going to wear her again in Seattle next year for the Glass Art Society conference, because it's coming back to the United States. It's going to be in Seattle. And the queen of the glass fashion show, Laura Donifer, is organizing another one. So super excited for that. I need to work on building a tiara for her, and I'm thinking some sort of sleeves as well, because my arms are kind of naked in it. It was a corset for the Murano glass fashion show. And I can add some more to the dress. Down below, I've got a skirt that I can add to. And the tiara, of course, I made a matching fused glass necklace. It had some eyes. I don't know if that piece is going to fit anymore. I think I had to cut it a little bit too small. All right, that'll be my next one. Sometimes this textured glass cuts a little weird with the mosaic nippers. This is some of the older church glass. So I work in the architectural glass arts, the stained glass studio in my town, and our class sessions are not running right now, but that's where I'm able to get a lot of my mosaic glass, especially because they've got just a ton of stained glass that they go through, and then a certain size, it's just garbage for them, which is super sad. And there just aren't enough people in Lincoln doing mosaics so that we can actually salvage some of that from the landfill. So if anybody's interested, I've got a great source for some mosaic scrap at a really good price. We usually sell it for 50 cents a pound. You just have to pay for shipping to get it, and I bet a lot of that would fit in a priority mailer. All right, look at that, so fast. It didn't take that long at all. This gives me a new appreciation for Bob Ross and any of those artists that work with a live audience while there's not really much to watch. Okay, well, that actually didn't take too long. So for that project, I used the No Days Mosaic Adhesive film, right? So this is I was using previously. And again, it's a heat set adhesive. It's that sheet. I had cut the sheet to the shape of the base. I put it on there. I heat set it so it adheres, and then I can start building on it. And I'm going to stick it back on the griddle that I've got over here. So you can use a hot gun, a heat gun. I prefer the non-active, the least active method of working with it. Let's see, what temperature? That's a good question, Cheryl. This is actually, so griddles aren't really that accurate as far as temperature goes, and they're usually used for cooking, so the temperatures are really hot. I want the griddle to be around 160, 70, 80. So really, I plug the griddle in and it's on warm, and that's usually hot enough. The other griddle that I have, the other griddle that I have, it says off, but even if it's plugged in, it's on. This one doesn't have an off. It's just if it's plugged in, it's on. This one I really like for my mandalas. They're a nice large size, so I can get everything done. But yeah, that's a great question. Same thing if I were going to do this in a toaster oven. I can do it in a toaster oven, about 170, 180, and the oven as well. You can do it in the oven as well. So I like to keep the release liner underneath my projects just in case there's a little bit of adhesive that gets off of the glass. Then you're not contaminating your oven with anything that's going to burn off and maybe give your food a funny flavor, right? So good question. I'm going to go gather a bucket of water, a large bucket of water, and a small bucket of water, and a small container to mix my grout in, and I will be right back. All right. Bucket of water. I just put my sponges in it right away. This is going to be a small container that I mix my grout in. This is another container that I will also put water in for cleaning my sponge. And then this is going to be the, yeah, you'll see a couple different things here. All right, tweezers. It's time to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Everything is, you know, that adhesive, maybe turn it up just a touch. The adhesive has liquefied. Now I can come in here and make sure that everything is exact. This is the last time I'm going to heat this, at least ideally. So this is the time where I really want to be particular about where the pieces are. I want my lines to be straight because it's a quilt. I want my gaps to be consistent so that my design reads well. So some of the pieces kind of moved into each other, so you can see they kind of move together. So I want to kind of separate those out. And I don't recommend touching these with your finger. It's more like a do as I say, not as I do kind of situation. but I've got a short stubby fingernail, right? So I'm just using my fingernail. I could use 2 tweezers too. I have a couple pairs of tweezers. All right, so get that all straightened out. That looks pretty good. This was the one that I think I need to set still, or that hadn't set yet. And the next one of these I try, I think I'm gonna cut, well, it's gonna be much larger, but the pieces are still gonna be just as small. So I'm going to try and cut them on the Morton board, and just have containers of each size, kind of like a quilter does. My mom used to have boxes and boxes of quilt strips pre-cut all to the same size, and then when you're working on a pattern, you can just make then you just make sure you pull it out and everything's ready. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna pull this off, and my cake plate spatula thing, I'm gonna set it down and this to the table, give this a look, make sure everything stayed where I wanted it to. Notice I still have a little bit of time because glass is an insulator, but then I don't want to continue moving this after it's set up, because then you're just going to be weakening the bond. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so I just need to let this cool down, and I can actually start mixing my grout while I'm waiting for this to cool down, because it's a chemical reaction and the grout needs to slake for 10 minutes ish. Looks like my table isn't quite even. My pieces look like they kind of slid a little bit as I pulled it off, but there's still plenty of heat in here. All right, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. Okay, time to mix the grout. So when you're grouting, you want to be wearing a mask because you don't want to breathe in this stuff, right? So you want to leave it low to the table and not breathing it in. This is Color sanded grout. Let's see that. Color sanded grout. You can buy it at the hardware store. And I don't need a ton of this because I don't have a very big mosaic. So I'm going to say that's probably enough. Let's just make a little bit more though. It's always better to have a little bit more than you need, because then you don't have to mix more up when you run out. So now I have leftovers. I'll just make a grout rock. Funny thing is, last week when I was in the Sandhills, they don't have rocks out there. So it was actually very novel to them. They got rocks. They were so excited about these grout rocks. They were naming the little grout family. It was so cute. Okay. So because it's such a small amount of grout, I'll do this up here. Because it's such a small amount of grout, there we go. I am going to use the sponge to add water. The package tells you how much grout you should be using to mix the whole package, but I don't want to mix a whole package worth of grout. So that's probably not enough, but I'm going to go ahead and start mixing it in anyway. And initially the grout doesn't really take to the water. So you just kind of got to mix it around until it starts to actually get along. And notice I'm just mixing it gently with my finger. It's going to start coming together here a little bit. And the texture that I'm going for is wet sand that holds together in my fist. All right, so this is actually quite a good amount of water that's in there. It's almost like, I'd say maybe a crust where you're adding butter right now. However, I need it to be a little bit wetter. So just a little bit of grout, or water rather, to the grout. All right, and I'm gonna mix it around. That's getting there. There's still a little bit of wetness, or dryness rather. So a couple more drops, and it gets to a point where it's really easy to add too much water. So you don't want to add a whole bunch at a time. Just be patient. It's getting closer. Check this out. All right. It's getting pretty close. I think I'm going to mix it just a hair, just like maybe 2 more water, as maybe 5 drops of water, regardless. So I want to get down into those corners with my finger and dig out any of the dry grout that's in there. I want it to really mix well. So when you're mixing grout, it's a physical transformation, right? It went from dry to wet, but it's also a chemical reaction. Slaking is basically taking all of the water at a molecular level and incorporating it into the grout. That's pretty good right there, actually. Could have done this in a bigger container. Catch all of this, right? So that's pretty good right there. It could probably use just a couple of drops more of water because it's going to slake. And a lot of times, well, as a beginner, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to grout, or especially when it's your first time, you get your hands in there and you stop messing with it because it feels fun. Your mosaic suddenly has been covered by mud and you don't want to stop because you need to clean it up. That's not what you want to do, right? So let me show you. All right, there's my grout, and that's actually really good. Like, it's not falling apart. I squeeze it and it's together. And the slaking is where all that molecular water is going to soak up into there. So I'm going to let it slake. And then I'm going to tell you why most of the time I don't let it slake. So this is a very tiny mosaic. This is going to be able, I'm going to grout this in no time. I'm not really too worried about that. A lot of the mosaics that I work with students are larger, so it takes them a little bit longer because they're working in small sections. And when you're initially starting out, you add a little bit of grout and then you're messing with it. And I'm going to use the sponge, not my fingers, because I don't want to tear my fingers up. But you're messing with it and you keep messing with it and you keep messing with it and you keep messing with it. It just tends to take beginners a little bit longer to grout, to do anything really, because you need to skill build before you're an expert, right? So it's going to take you a little bit longer to do it. And the slaking process kind of occurs while they're grouting. Technically, probably not the best thing to do, but these are beginning projects and they're not supposed to last until the end of the time. And that quite a while, well beyond when they're still enjoying the project, right? So I don't typically let it slake for the full 10 minutes. So you're supposed to let it slake for 10 minutes and then go back in. It's going to set up, it's soaking in all this water again, and then you're ready to apply it. Well, if you don't apply it within, gosh, I don't even know the time limit, but typically I say 10 to 15 minutes. Like, if you're not done by then, the grout is going to, it's going to start setting up a little bit, and you don't want to add more water because then that's going to change the mixture. So this is how I grout. All right. It's been slaking, for a couple minutes. It's pretty, it's kind of dry and crumbly. That's okay. You know how I said we don't want to add a lot of water to it? Well, we're going to end up adding a little bit of water to it because we're going to grout with a damp sponge. So I take this sponge and I water from there as I can, right? I don't want there to be a lot of water in this sponge. Just damp. That's all I want. Then I'm going to take my mosaic And this is cooled down now. This is ready to grout. Look at that. It's so pretty. Oh my, those are my guidelines on the back side. Like I said, when I'm cleaning, I don't worry about cleaning the backs of the glass or the top of the glass, just in between, because the grout is going to do all of this for us. So I take a little bit of the grout and I just, there, that's probably more than enough. That's probably more than I need. I'm going to try and do this a little bit closer to you, so it's a little awkward for me, but you'll be able to see it better. I take my sponge and I'm pushing the grout in between the cracks, but not pushing like this. That's not going to do anything, right? I'm kind of going around in circles and across the glass. See how it's now being pushed into those crevices because I'm coming across the glass and the grout has nowhere to go but into the gaps, right? See that? See how it's going into the gaps now? All right, so that's the idea. I say pushing the grout into the gaps, but it's not this. It's kind of going in circles and across the glass. And that forces the grout in because there's nowhere else for it to go. And now notice this grout, or this sponge rather that I'm holding, this is what's going to get cut if any of those little bits of glass poke me, not myself. If you're using a sponge, you're going to save yourself. I did this once during a class and I was just working a little bit faster because when I'm doing a demo, I hate people sitting there waiting for me. I feel like they want to get on with the project. They're not going to watch you. They're getting tired, Nancy. So I was doing it quickly and I totally slipped myself on a shard, no less, of one of the mosaic pieces. All right, look at that. All the gaps are filled in. I've got this extra grout. All the gaps have been filled in at this point, right? This is not quite where some mounds, right? So at this point, I just want to make sure that I'm pulling off any extra grout. And this doesn't take, this isn't like a long involved process. I just want to pull off any of the extra grout. And that's where I want to stop. Stop messing with it. Don't keep messing with it. Remember, I built up right to the edges, so I don't have to worry about anything on the edges, but I just need to stop messing with it. Grouting, but it's done. Almost, right? We need to clean it yet. Okay, so now I have this fantastic amount of grout. If I had another project, what I'll do is I'll have several projects going at once so that I can mix up all the grout and do them all at once. However, today is not one of those days. I'm going to make grout rock. I put these out in the garden. Little messages time, but the one at the studio that's in the alley that gets water thrown on it, all sorts of stuff thrown on it, it's actually still there. So a little hard in it, maybe. Just gonna push that in, and it'll be my love rock. There we go. Okay, there's my love rock. I'm just gonna set that aside and let that set up on its own. Now, grouting is a lot of, hurry up and then wait. Not necessarily hurry up, but it's a lot of do something and then sit around and wait. So while I'm waiting, I'm gonna start cleaning up. I'm gonna clean up my sponge. I like to reuse these over and over. Call me frugal, call me Midwestern, call me an environmentalist, whatever you will. I don't believe in waste, so there's no reason once and then throw it out. Yeah, these sponges are cheap. And yes, I've already cut it down from an enormous sponge. Like seriously, this sponge is probably about the size of my face when I pick it up at the store. But I cut it down into these small sizes because I'm grouting intricate pieces. So I use the sponge to help me, grout all these intricate areas. All right, so there's that bit of water. You do not want to pour this down the drain. It's sanded grout, okay? So take it outside and just pour it in your yard. Some ceramic studios have special drains for collecting things, so you can pour it down there, but don't pour it down your drain. You're going to clog up your drain. I did say it was a chemical reaction. When your mixer hardens up, it will actually stick together in the bottom of this tub. So anyway, I like to go pour that out in the yard. And then I've got a clean container where I'm going to continue to clean this sponge. Hi, Kim. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Cheryl. I saw Kristen Carlin join too. Thanks to everybody that's joining in. I hope you're all having a good day. I know this time that we're living in is incredibly difficult, especially depending on where you are. Folks in California and New York, where you're not even supposed to leave your house. Case, they said, the first confirmed case. So social isolation and distancing is a good way to go. We don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. We don't have enough beds if everybody gets sick. Anyway, look out for your neighbors. Be kind to each other. Look out for yourselves. So what I'm waiting here for is the grout to start to haze up. So I need that to become a little bit drier before I can really go on with the polishing of it. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to show you some other pieces. Just going to take these guys off. My hands, oh, must be a hole in there. Because I was using bone grout, my hands probably won't look quite as zombie-ish as they would normally if I were using black grout. So it won't be quite the ordeal if I end up with some grout on my hands. But thought I'd show you some of the other stuff. So this weekend, I'm planning on doing a bunch of projects as I can. This was with the No Days Mosaic Adhesive, the film. So I cut that. I cut it to the size of my pieces, the pieces on it. This is the piece that I worked on last week or 2 weeks ago when I was in Valentine, Nebraska. It's a Peacock Feather. Here's another little sampler piece that I did. So earlier in the video, if you caught us or didn't catch us and you really want to go back and check it out, you can see I had the Morton system out and I was cutting strips and then squares and then triangles and then skinny rectangles and circles. And then I even cut a shard or two later when I remembered it. Just some various ways to cut tiles, and this is just a sampler to kind of practice laying down those tiles, as were all of these little guys that we started with, right? So I started with one of these, and actually it's right here. Started with one of these. I used the pewter No Days groutless, and because it was the pewter and I have a hook on it, that top piece you can't really see the light through it. I can see the backside because I'm underneath the piece, right? But even with the pewter and the black, you can still see through the glass. Lots of reflections. There we go. See through the glass. But notice you can't see through it up here. There's a good thick layer of that pewter. The pewter and the black, you can use glass on glass because you're going to press out. And I'm sorry, I switched products without telling you. That's the groutless that we started with earlier today. I figured I could get those projects going fairly quickly and easy because I had most of it prepped already, and I had this project from last week or the week before that was half finished, so it wouldn't take too long. And this project, this is a really quick and easy project. I did this with the kids, and it took 2 hours start to finish. Some of them finished earlier. Some of them took the whole time. You know, some of them were really focused on, they had an idea and they really wanted to make it work. Some of them had no clue what they were doing, and they just actually listened and followed. And everybody turned out great. I posted a lot of those pictures on the Instagram page. I don't know if I've shared the albums to the No Days page yet, but my page, Kalix Ann, my artist page, where a lot of my teaching residencies. So I'm on the roster of teaching artists for the Nebraska Arts Council. So I travel a lot and teach in schools, and that was my latest residency. It was just in the last couple of weeks. So I was out in Valentine, Nebraska, and Cody and Kilgore area on the Sand Hills. Beautiful area that I'd never been before, ranch country. small towns. It was fun. I enjoyed myself. Fort Niobrara, the Niobrara River runs through up there, and a lot of people go tubing on the Niobrara River in the summer in Nebraska. So I definitely like to go back and check it out in the summertime when it's a little less gray. But it wasn't actually that gray. I'd say a little bit more browns and a little bit of reds in the grasses, the grasslands out there. It was really beautiful. Anyway, the No Days Grout list is what we started with. You can do jewelry pieces with those really easily as well. We are ready to polish this. So it's so close to being done. Again, I'm going to take my damp sponge, and a lot of times what I like to do first is actually take a dry paper towel and just kind of give it a rub down. If I've got a good consistency on my grout and not too much texture on my glass, this is all I'm really going to need. This avoids the whole wet sponge making more of a mess, adding more water to your grout than you need to. So you can see, maybe you can see, I'll show you here in a second if you can't, right? So it's polishing up pretty well, right? There's a spot over here I haven't gotten to yet, but there's a lot of textured glass going on there, and there's grout in that glass. So I'm going to take my damp sponge. This is what I do next. So I'm just going to pull across the surface. This is just going to take any grout or grout haze that's on top of the surface, pull across the surface, and then turn the sponge, right? I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to add water, and I want to make sure that I have a clean side of the sponge every time I go across the surface, right? Then I need to clean that out. And that's looking pretty good. It's still a little bit hazy. That's because I just dragged a whole bunch of wet grout across the surface. So after that clears up, I think I'll be able to polish this up for good. So notice there's my square corner I've kind of lost. So I'm going to come in here and remove any grout that's on top of the glass where it shouldn't be. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to let that haze up again, and then we'll do a final polish. On the back side, I can take my sponge and polish that. And if this Sharpie line doesn't come off, I can take a little bit of the dry grout, the stuff that went bad, help polish off any of those Sharpie lines. And I can even use that on the front side after the grout has set up a little bit to help polish up the front side. But that's almost it for that. So we're going to set that and let it haze up again. It won't take nearly as long this time to haze up. I'm going to finish with one final polish over here. Got my paper towel. Come in and give a scrub rub. And then this project will be done too. And then that's going to be it for our little mosaic play date for now. It's time to maybe grab a drink. I've been talking all this time. My glass of water is over here undisturbed. Have some water, maybe catch a bite to eat for lunch. Think about, or late lunch, or think about what fusing projects I might want to do. I'll probably do something later this evening and something tomorrow. Not quite sure what yet. Got a couple of stepping stones that I wanted to work on, so maybe, ooh, this is so shiny now. This is pretty. All right. So I'll probably do some of the stepping stones too at some point tonight, or a stepping stone at least. I've got a log cabin-ish design that I'm working on. I want to make a patio this summer. See if I get around to that. All right, back side, right? Oh, front side. Oh, that looks awesome. So I'll probably get a good picture of this and then post it to Facebook or the Instagrams or both, and you guys can check this out. Thanks again for joining me. Glad we could all be together in this time. It was nice out earlier this week, and then winter came back for a little bit, so it's nice-ish. It's sunny at least, but it's still a little cold to be hanging out on the back porch working. So I'm relegated to the basement for now, and we'll see you guys soonish. If you want to catch another one of these live videos, don't forget to hit that notification button. I think if you go up and click on the follow. It'll give you the option for notifications, and you can get notifications specifically for going live, I think. So we'll see you soon. All right. Have a great afternoon. Bye.